So to begin this assignment, you'll need two DICOM image stacks, one describing the adult pan-troglodytes and one describing the juvenile pan-troglodytes, the two chimps, different stages of development. These are available on Blackboard. If you go into the assignment section, and there's a link to the DICOM files here, which will take you to a Dropbox window where you can download these. Once you have Slicer open, the easiest way to get these DICOM files into Slicer is to just drag the folder which houses them into the interface. I'll demonstrate using the adult pan-troglodytes. You'll have to repeat these steps, but then you'll have to apply them to the juvenile pan-troglodytes as well to complete the final illustration. So I'm just dragging this whole folder into Slicer. So you should see a window like this and just say OK. And we want to copy them into our to the local database in case the link to those files is broken. Now it is bringing them in. The DCMs are the DICOM files. And this is our DICOM browser. You can see in the background. So once you've brought them in once, this should always appear in your DICOM browser when you load it up. It's completed. Now sometimes it will open directly here. If it doesn't, just go into your DICOM browser, navigate to the one that you want. So this is the Pan-troglodytes virus. There's a female adult, and select it, and you'll see there's only one series associated with this, so we will load this. And now we can see the images here of the specimen. So we're interested in exporting a bone model, so the skull and other surrounding skeletal elements, and a representation of the external structure of the face, so the skin. So if we click on the editor button up here in the core module, this is where we're going to do all the work to select these different thresholds. And the first thing it will ask us is how we want to label the different areas that we'll be selecting. And the generic anatomy colors is fine, so we'll just say apply. And now in the module window, we're going to be using this tool, the threshold selection tool, and we are going to go to label 2 for bone, and we're also going to use label 3 for skin. So the best way to organize this when we have more than one structure that we want to segment is in the editor to go up here to per structure volumes. And we want to make sure that we have number 2 selected down here first, and just say add structure. It's going to ask us which one we want, so it didn't matter whether we had it selected. Click on bone. Now we'll add another structure, and strangely this window always pops up behind your module window, and we'll select skin. So now we've got bone and skin. And just note that the label volume has a different name, one for bone, one for skin, based on the label color that we chose. So the entire volume is what we see here, the entire specimen. But we are going to define some sub-volumes that are defined by the labels we put on them. So now that we've done that, we'll select bone, and we'll do that one first. The only tool we need to use is this threshold tool. We'll click on this, scroll down, and we want to push the left slider over until we just have bone selected. This one we can leave all the way over, because if we start pulling it in, we start eroding the densest part of the bone. So we want to try and make sure we capture all of the hard tissue. So you can see we're getting all the teeth here, it looks like, and we're not capturing any of the soft tissue, any of these floating bits. There may be some parts in the ear that are captured. You can see here the hard cartilage, but that's something we'll remove in Maya. So once we have all the bone selected, we can just press apply. Now back up to the per structure volume, and we will select skin and do the same thing. Press the threshold effect. Now it's a different color, the color we chose for the skin label. And instead of going up from the left, we want to go down from the right. So we want to exclude the bony tissue. The reason that we want to do this is so the teeth are not included. Now this might be a little difficult to achieve. If we look in the yellow window only, you can see that it's still surrounding the teeth. Now, in some senses, this doesn't really matter if we don't capture all of it, because we're only using the skin as an outline in our illustration, or a black silhouette in the background. If I keep pulling it in, I'm going to lose everything. So it might not be possible to get rid of all of the hard tissue around the teeth here. So it's going to be something like this. I don't want to erode the soft tissue in the middle. So in some cases we might have to live with this, keeping this part around the teeth. And it's not worth it to me to go through and try and paint this out, since we're using the image of the soft tissue just as a backer for the skull images. So I'm just going to scroll through here. We're missing some parts here. Now this doesn't matter, that's inside. But there must be some high density tissue in there that's being excluded. So yeah, it looks like we're not going to be able to get rid of that stuff around the teeth, but I can live with that. I'll apply that as well. We'll go back to our 4-up view. Now this view allows us to see the volume rendering of the entire object or the models that we create. We don't really need to see the volume rendering, so we won't go through that step. But now we've selected our 2 labels, so you can see when I choose them, they're selected here for me. Now I want to go to the model making process. So to make a model out of our label maps, the quickest way to access it is we're still in the editor, to press this button here to the model maker, or make model effect. But you can see that I can only deal with one model at a time with this. It's better to go to the full model maker. So pressing on this button here will take us to a new module, and we can use this to make multiple models. So the parameter set we can just leave alone. The input volume is important. So this one is just the entire label. If we go down here, we want to make the bone model first. We'll select that. We're going to select a model hierarchy. We don't have a model hierarchy yet, so we're going to click on this and create and rename a new model hierarchy. And we'll call this one Adult Chimp Anatomy. Doesn't really matter as long as it's descriptive. The model name, we don't really have to add a model name here. We'll just put this word model in there. It's already going to get the word bone in there because of the label name. But I'm going to write bone in here again just to make sure. And we have to open up the model making parameters. So right now we have to choose a start and end label, so we could do multiple labels here. But we're just going to, bone is number 1. So if we go up to number 1, it will select that and choose that one. Now we've got to make some decisions here about how much we want to smooth the model, how much we want to decimate the model. So smoothing is in the process of generating the 3D mesh. When it looks in the volume, it's going to decide how to average the voxels. So the more smoothing, you'll lose some fine detail, but you'll get a smoother model. And I'm going to experiment with this a little bit, and you may have to do this too. Come back once or twice and export different models at different smooth levels. So the default is 10. Is 0, as you can see in this little helpful tip that pops up. 0 is no smoothing. I'm going to turn this up. I'll try 30. And then decimate means how many polygons are removed from the final model. If it's too low, then it doesn't remove any polygons and you get a very, very dense mesh. Through experience, I think 0.25 is probably too low for something like this. We can try 0.6, so the higher the number, the more is removed. Again, what you're balancing here is the size of the model, and we're going to reduce this to a certain degree in Maya as well, but also the amount of detail that are captured. So actually, I'm going to put it back to 0.5. I'm going to try 0.5. And just to remind myself, because I'm making these choices, I'm going to name this model name bone 30, 50. And this way I'll remember that when I exported this one, I did a smooth of 30 and a decimate of 50, or 0.5. And if I do different iterations of this to test how they work in Maya, then I'll know which is which. So now we can just press apply, and it will work through the process of going through the volume and generating a three-dimensional mesh from that, a surface model rather than a volumetric model. Unfortunately, we can't bring volumetric models directly into Maya. We have to convert them to surface meshes. Okay, so status is completed. Now, if we want to view this model, sometimes it will just pop up here, but not always. So if we go into the quick set up here for models, you can see if we can turn this on. It doesn't always pop up, but that doesn't mean the model wasn't created. There it is. It's just moved down. So I pressed the center of the 3D view on the scene here. So looks like a pretty good model. Looking at it now, I think maybe I could have even smoothed it more, but I'll bring it into Maya and see how many polygons it's made out of. It's got these loose floating polygons here, which look like they're part of the ear cartilage, but that's fine. I'll get rid of that stuff in Maya. Okay, so now we want to go back to the editor, then go back to the model maker. You could go back to the model maker directly by going through all modules and just finding it here. So this time we don't want to use the bone label, so the input volume will change and we'll do the skin label. This is still under the same hierarchy, so adult chimp anatomy, but this will be skin. Oops. I'll call this one skin. And then I'm actually going to smooth. I'm going to turn this up to, this will take number 2. I'm going to smooth this one even more because I know this is a very dense mesh. So I'm going to try 50. And decimate, I'm going to turn this one up even higher to 0.7 because I know this is a very dense mesh. So I'll call this one skin 50, 70. And I'll apply this. And it's running, and we'll see what we get in just a moment. You can see that this one is taking longer. It's there's much more internal structure for it to bring in. If we look at the map here, you see it's got to pick its way out around and in between all the bones. And this makes for a very dense mesh. In some ways, it would be better just to capture the outer shell. What When I've tried to do that though, we get some bad geometry. So this is a good looking model. You can see that we didn't exclude the part around the teeth here, unfortunately. But for what I'm going to use this for, it's not worth it to me. It's slightly low resolution model, but there's going to be so much internal structure that it's going to be hard enough for Maya to deal with this. That I'm not going to worry about this. Again, this will ultimately just be used as a black silhouette to sit behind our skull render to put it into context. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. So we have our two models. If we want to view them, we can go to the model window and turn skin off and on. And you can see they're calibrated. They're sitting right on top of each other, which is what we want for when we bring it into Maya. So how do we save our work, and how do we export our models? Well, this is the same step. If we go up here to the top left and the save button and click on this, we can save the scene and the models that were created. The first thing we'll want to do is to change the directory for the selected files. Right now they're all going to different places. But we want to save them all into a single folder that you can take with you when you leave this computer. So I'll change the directory for all these files, and I'm just going to go into my desktop, and I've done this a couple of times, but I'll create a new folder, and I'll call this Adult PT for pan-troglodytes demonstration. Okay, I'll choose this. Now everything will go there. And one of the most important ones is this MRML scene. This saves everything in your scene, or at least it points to where everything is, all your label maps, your DICOM database, and that kind of stuff. So we can rename this one Adult PT. Keep the extension, of course. All this other stuff we can just leave. I wouldn't change these names in case they refer to something. Now if we look down at the bottom here are our two models, bone and skin. You can see this information that we put in here. We have to change the file type that's saved. We don't want a .vtk file, we want a .stl for these. These are stereolithograph or stereolithography files. And now we'll save. This will take a moment because it's got to generate all of these files for the first time and move that DICOM data set over to this new folder. Now let's just go double check and make sure everything has been created properly. Just navigate to my desktop where I saved it. And I called this Adult PT Demonstration. Here are our two models. There's the scene file. So before we finish, let me just quit out of Slicer. We already saved it, so we can say OK. And now let's open Slicer again, and I'll just show you how to reopen a scene in case you need to go back and try to export those models again. So it opens up to an empty scene. You can click on Load Data here in the Welcome Scene module. If you don't see that, you can do it up here in the top left as well. We want to choose Files to Add and navigate to that MRML file. Mine's called Adult PT. Open that, say OK. And we'll think for a minute and import all of that data, hopefully preserving our label maps and models and everything. And there we go. So if for some reason you wanted to regenerate these models, if the quality wasn't good enough or the polygon count was too high or whatever, you can go here into your models menu And you can actually delete these if you want to. Just say delete model. Just select it, say delete, right click and say delete model. You can rename it and so on. And re-export them following those steps that we just went through.